Kia ora everybody. We're here to run a information session on the Connected Environments program. Hope you find this session really helpful. We'll run through the program's details and let you know who Tech Futures Lab is. We'll go through the program structure, and then we have a Q&A session. We've got one of our industry advisors on the call as well, and they'll run through some of the content and how the relevance of the Connected Environments program to what's happening out there in the real world as well. And then we can have an opportunity for a Q&A session where we'll answer any questions from the audience, and then Amanda will run through next steps if you're interested in signing up for the program. So just to open up our space, I would like to start with a karakia. Ko te kawa o runga, ko te kawa o raro, ko te kawa ora, ko te kawa ora. E rongo e whakairihia ki ruga, turuturu o whiti whakamaue kia tina, tina, huye, tai kie. Kia ora. All right, so we've just got a video here to play.
We are the Mind Lab and Tech Futures Lab. Together, our purpose is to create impactful futures. We do this by providing innovative education to empower all people of Aotearoa New Zealand and beyond to stay ahead of a constantly changing world. We create communities where we can inspire each other, collaborate, transform, and explore the future together. From rapid upskilling to substantial learning experiences focused on big change. Primarily delivered online, our programs are designed with the real world front of mind. Together we teach context, not content, so everything you learn is able to be used straight away in your workplace, your community, your industry, your business, or even your side hustle. Come and see what the future is all about. Get excited and arm yourself with the skills, the confidence and ability to make real change. Come and learn with us.
Fantastic. So just going to stop that there. Cool. So hopefully that video showcases a little bit about who we are, our premises, and what we're all about. We're all about innovative, forward-thinking programs that's experiential in its nature in our approach to teaching and learning. It's always, all our programs are, project-based and geared towards, solving real-world problems. So in terms of this program's team members, so my name is Maheshi. I'm the postgraduate program lead for the program. And then we have Judy Christie, who is also on the call, who is our program manager. Judy takes care of the pastoral care elements of the program and general overall program management and coordination of things. And then we also have Kriv Naker, who is industry advisor on the Connected Environments program, but he's also the founder and managing director of Synaptic and the founder and chair of New Zealand Iot Alliance. So it's amazing to have his experience and expertise on the program in supporting the development of our candidates within the program as well. So basically, the program is designed for business professionals, technology practitioners, and community leaders who want to design solutions that answer real world problems. And I think the emphasis is on the last part, that real world problems, that's what we're all about. And the Connected Environment, brings together people, process, technology, and data to enhance our decision-making and create better, more sustainable, ethical outcomes. And Kriv will talk to you a little bit more about, how we realize this in the program. The program will enable you to, one, scope out the problem space, understand the market opportunity, the risks and mitigation and potential value that could be gained for people, place, and planet by solving the problem. And this is something that you will hear a lot on the program, that the focus is really people, place, and planet. To see the bigger picture, design effective and sustainable solutions by using a holistic insight approach that gathers and analyzes data from the wider environment the problem sits within. So this is a problem of your choosing, so you really get to deep dive into this. 3, do things smarter and more efficiently. Discover how exponential technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence can link in with sensor collected data to create smarter, more effective solutions. So all the subject matter experts that we have on the program are people who are, you know, part of really amazing organizations or startups, or they're consultants themselves. They bring in that knowledge and wealth of experience into the program and really teach you on, you know, the application of these exponential technologies. For think broader and deeper about impact, become attuned to ethical implications and broader social and environmental impacts to ensure solution design adds value now and for tomorrow. So it's all about that for good peace. Whatever you're developing, you know, you're developing with that ethical lens in mind, and you're developing something for good as well, which is really important for us. So what you'll gain by completing this program is a strategic, sustainably designed solution that solves a problem now, yet does not create new ones on its wake. So you really get to focus on a project that you're really passionate about. You also get the support and encouragement to focus in on your values and purpose alongside a collective of like-minded people, and, you know, people generally that we attract on this program and across all our other programs as well are really like-minded, in the sense that they're really here to create that change and to understand how you can use emerging disruptive technologies, you know, connected environments, IoT, to realize a solution to a problem that you have identified. Collaboration with a wide range of people from all sorts of industries with all kinds of experiences, but all on the same journey as you. So this relates to the peers that you'll be interacting with. This also relates to the subject matter experts that I spoke of earlier. It's that collaboration opportunity to, you know, crowdsource solutions to problems that you have identified as well. Exponentially expand your professional networks, students, faculty, guest speakers, and alumni. So by doing one of our programs, you're really tapping into that TFL community network that we have. And as alumni, we've recently launched a alumni group as well. So we want you all to be lifelong learners, and we'll ensure that we have, you know, networking opportunities for you to have those continued conversations even beyond the program as well. It's an NZQA accredited qualification postgraduate program at level 8, so you gain 60 credits, and you can also stack your knowledge towards a master's degree. So Amanda might pop in some links in the chat, because we've recently developed some micro-credential programs, as well as, you know, stackable opportunities to work towards the Master of Technological Futures program as well. So if you're interested in seeing what that pathway looks like, what that cross-crediting process looks like, you know, please reach out to one of us, and we're happy to answer those questions for you. Yeah, and then check out those links that will be in the chat message as well. So just some nitty-gritty information about fees and what that looks like. So the fees are what is indicated there. We have an early bird of 10% discount if you get your application in by the 8th of February. So you can see the fees go from $6,000 to $5,000. We also have the fee scheme available for those people who don't have tertiary level qualifications before, first-time learners. So please check that out. But our enrollments team will be more than happy to kind of help you through that process as well if you're unsure. Our programs are also supported by StudyLink, so you can get a student loan, and our admissions team are happy to help you with getting that set up as well. But we do offer scholarships. We have Tangata Whenua Scholarship for those students who identify as Maori, Pacific Ako scholarships for students identifying as Pacifica, and Taipa KK scholarship who are for those students who are 60+ years. So if you identify with any of those groups, then, you know, please know that you have those scholarship opportunities available, and all the details are on the website as well. And if you're trying to convince your current employer to help support you in doing this program, because some of our students have aligned their projects to, you know, their current work, their role, and have collaboratively worked towards a project that benefits your employer and you. You know, we're happy to provide any evidence that you require for that application with your employer as well. Cool. So structurally, it's a 34-week program. So If it falls in the Christmas break, we just don't count 3 weeks of that Christmas break into the 34 weeks, just in case if you're wondering. It's generally live online sessions, 2 hours live online, generally between 4 to 6 p.m. on Tuesdays, which is the March intake, and on Wednesdays, which is the July intake that we have for 2022. And then these will run weekly, except in those instances where we'll have the 6 full day face-to-face workshops. So the face-to-face workshops will happen at our lab, the TFL lab in Grafton. And these workshops will generally run from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. On Tuesdays for the March intake and on Wednesdays for the July intake. So all of this detail is included in the student handbook available online. But if you're not sure, if you'd like us to run you through the structure, please get in touch as well, and we'll have our contact details at the end of this presentation. So it's really weekly applied and self-directed learning, and of course that will be paced with the assessment structure that Kriv will run you through as well. And as support, you know, we have office hours, Q&A sessions prior to your live online sessions. And we've had a particularly large cohort in the last intake. And so we've implemented OHU sessions, which is basically smaller groups of community working groups that get together just to discuss assessments, you know, a session, an interesting article that they read, or whatever you need. And this is facilitated by some of our staff as well. So, and on that note, I might just hand it over to you, Kriv.
Thanks, Maheshi. So as Maheshi mentioned earlier, I'm an industry advisor, an expert advisor to TFL across a range of different areas. My background is in strategy consulting, but recently, so when having a look at the impact of disruptive, exponential emerging technologies across industries here in New Zealand, and increasingly so the industries that we build here in New Zealand and take globally. So one of the key aspects of connected environments is not just having a look at the technology elements of developing an IoT solution, but it's really evaluating the impact of that solution in the world. And so we challenge, we provoke the way current solutions are being thought of in the connected environment space, in the space that involves other exponential technologies. So from a business strategy perspective, it's having a look at those frameworks, having a look at various perspectives that impact our technology choice, our application into industry choice, and whether that be a commercial opportunity or a not-for-profit opportunity, developing economic value or developing social value. You know, we want to challenge and open up all of these opportunities. And so that identifying and validating opportunities is to really create a broad spectrum, a broad scope of all the various opportunities that we can provide this connected environments application to. We have a look at pitching ideas and team planning. And so we want this to be really bedded down in the real world as much as possible. Connected environments is about having those sessions from expert speakers in industries, having subject matter experts across some of the technology and functional applications, but then really being able to pitch and create that environment where the solutions that you come up with really have a well-aligned perspective to real-world application, real-world value, real-world outcomes. Another part of the business strategy that we focus on during phase one, and I'll talk to you a little bit about phase one and phase two, is that market analysis and value proposition. And that's a large part of before we get to the technology, before we have a look at the technical components. And this is where, you know, a lot of the previous misgivings in IoT is we jump too quickly into the technology elements. What's a sensor? What's a device? What's the network? We want to have a look at where this is best applied and positioned. What is that market? What is that problem statement? What's that problem overview? What is the market that can really value this? And most importantly, what are the users? Who are the customers? Who are the stakeholders for this problem area, and what value can be delivered to them? Then we also have a look at the technology, because underpinning all of this is the application of technology into this space. And so we run through Internet of Things platforms, system architecture. We have a look at the various network connectivity areas in terms of how getting that data from your sensor, from your device into a data storage analysis processing engine. And then obviously we have a look at that data presentation or insight presentation to your users, to your customers, to your stakeholders as well. So the key phases here when we're linking through business strategy and technology are, we have a look at that data collected area. What are we doing in data collection? What are the value points, the problem areas, but why are we collecting the data? And then how do we collect it, and how do we use technologies like IoT to collect the data via sensors and devices? We then move into the data analysis and processing. And this is where we apply techniques and technologies like AI, like machine learning, like algorithm design to work out what the business logic and how to generate insights from that data that we've just collected. And then the last part of that technology piece is the presentation. How do we visualize that data? How do we visualize those insights that we've now built up through the data collection and data analysis and processing for our users? How do we bring it to life? How do we convey that additional value that we've built and initiated these solutions for? Increasingly so, we want to also, as mentioned, challenge. We want to provoke the status quo in terms of, are we building these solutions in the right way? Are we aligning and applying them to the real world in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's ethical? And so a large part of the course during those second 16, 17 weeks is around the governance and ethics impact. So we have a look at the impact of various elements, on the impact of collecting data, the impact of how we analyze data and process, the impact on how we present that and in what environments. And so social, ethical, sustainable principles. We have a look at the wider governance approach across that. And we link that back to, just because we can do it with technology options that we have, should we be doing this? Is this good for the world? Is it good for the planet? Is it good for place? Is it good for people? And that, again, increasingly so is really important. We also delve into areas of connected environments or IoT that people might not be that aware of. And that is when you're building a device or when you're looking at how to source or how to build a device, are you looking at things like, if that device is going to be out there in the field, in the built environment for 10 years, that you're happy with the materials that were used in terms of building that device, or the company that's built that device, the sourcing, the procurement. Because once that device reaches its end of life or it's decommissioned, then we want to make sure that we haven't just left something out there in the environment that isn't able to be managed or maintained. So that's a large part also of the life cycle of connected environments, IoT, AI, machine learning. And the most important part, it's a glue that links people, process, technology, is the data. So we talk a lot about technology flows and how to get that value chain understood and apply it to the real world and then have a business context to it. But the data flows, the information flows, the insight flows are very important. And so during phase one, we really focus on that, understanding that data collected, data stored, data analyzed, data processed, and then the data insights information that are finally presented to the end, your end customer, your end user, your stakeholder. So that data visualization presentation, that actionable insights, the informed decision-making is a really important part. And we really focus on that to make sure that we drive very much so a user-centric view of connected environments and the positioning of technologies like IoT in the real world. Thanks, Maheshi. Next slide, please. So in terms of how we apply to the flow of the course, and this is really the design elements, which are quite unique to connected environments and TFL in terms of that learning structure. These formative assessments that you come up with, and the first one is really a group assessment. It's to put your minds together to have a look at applying some of these learnings. So you're given a specific problem, you told about these different phases of data collected, data analyzed and processed, data presented, and you work through as a team as to how you could apply that logic, how you can apply some of those technology platform elements to designing a solution. And it's a really good way of getting together as a collective, on collaborating, on really building that, that collective effort with your cohort, with your group, And again, this is very much akin to a real world environment where you brainstorm together, you design together, you innovate, you create together, and then you present that to a group of us that will provide you with some insights into what us as experts have gone through in the field as well. That second assessment then is to then take those learnings from a collaborative group and a collective and now start applying it to your real world problem. As Maheshi mentioned, at this stage of the course, you choose what you want to do. And it could be aligned to your current business environment, but equally so, it could be totally different. It could be something aligned to your personal life and your recreational life. We've had students that love mountain biking, and they're developing ways of enhancing the mountain biking environment with sensors and data to make that more of enjoyable. But if you're taking it seriously, to also provide that enhanced insights to how you can increase your performance in those environments. And so the breadth of how you think about these ideas is really something that we encourage and that we really support. We want to think outside the box. We want to use all of our different cultural positioning in New Zealand as well to apply a lot of those learnings, to apply a lot of those contexts, a lot of those environments to how you come up with your idea. So again, that formative assessment there is really to position your opportunity, to work through defining it, and some of the market elements. And so you'd use frameworks, you'd use concept maps, you'd go through a lean canvas learning opportunity to really help craft and distill your idea into an opportunity context. The summatives are the first sort of graded part, and this is part of the NZQA format and your journey through TFL as well. And this is where at the end of that phase one, at the end of your first 16 weeks of the course, you really start building up your initial project proposal. And again, this is as mapped to the real world as possible. All of the speakers that you hear, whether they are expert speakers from an industry perspective or have done this before from an entrepreneurial perspective, or are experts in their domain, in a technology domain or some other functional domain, they share a lot of those insights, and you'll have a lot of opportunity to interface and collaborate with your cohort and your colleagues, but also with the wider TFL community that is brought on to support the program. So that initial project proposal there goes through some key phases, a problem overview, really distilling what that problem statement is, having a look at some market analysis and identifying the users and stakeholders as part of that market, having a look at some of the aspects of the technology flows, the supply chain, the value chain of IoT and other exponential technologies, and then the data information flows, which are really, really a key part. And then at the end of phase one, because the awareness of ethics, the awareness of sustainability, some of those impact areas are so valuable, we conclude that phase one with what are your thoughts on those aspects, and we ask you to consider it as part of phase one, leading into the phase two, the next 16 weeks of the program. So phase two then really starts with three key areas. The first one is taking your initial project proposal and now challenging some of the decisions you made around your solution design, applying some of those impacts, and the impacts are around social dynamics, sustainability, ethics, using the economy models that we're currently using. So having a look at the sharing economy, the knowledge economy, the circular economy, and really testing some of those models against the choices that you made in phase one, particularly with the circular economy, to make sure that the elements that you've chosen as part of your solution design have circular economy, consider waste management, consider reuse, consider decommissioning of devices, hardware in the real world. And so we're really challenged to see whether you're building it yourself or when you're sourcing it from third parties, that circular approach to all elements of the design of your solution are considered. And that's a really important phase. The second really important part of that initial part of phase two then is to really have a look at some of the commercial and market entry impacts of your solution. So market readiness, what does it take to now take an idea like this to market? And so we bring in some, some of the investment community, the angel investors, the VCs, to talk about what they're looking for when they look at investing in some of these ideas. You'll have a look at having a look at some of those commercial areas, the cost, the prices of what's out there in the market, whether you're using a software as a service model or a cloud platform model, or you're developing some of the sensors or you're using third-party sensors to get an idea of scale. So if you're taking this to market, how do you scale? What do you start with? And we discuss concepts like MVP, a minimum viable product or proposition, and how do you get to that, and what has the most impact in terms of that market entry. So we really drive down in that first part, that summative group one, where again, you get together as a collective and you discuss those impacts, those ethical impacts, sustainability impacts, governance impacts, regulatory, social dynamics on some of the solutions. We give you, again, another example case studies to choose from here, and you really challenge and work through what needs to be done in that vein during the summative. And then that last phase there is finalizing your final project proposal. This is your market ready proposal or your idea. And this could be your market could be the company that you're currently working for. It doesn't need to be a startup idea or entrepreneurial idea. It could be a not-for-profit. It could be part of a product that fits into a wider scope. There's lots of different ways that you can do that. But we think about this final project proposal in some ways as your investor pitch. Now taking it to market or taking it out there, going, what do you think of these things that I've considered? I've considered all of these elements. I've considered, multiple different stakeholders, multiple impacts. And a key part then of this final element is having a look at the risks, assessing the risks that across all of those dimensions, and coming up with some mitigation strategies for how you would position for market entry and beyond as well. So in a nutshell, that's the flow of the program. It's a very, again, collaborative. We're seeing the cohorts, even though some of these assessments and the projects are individual, they're leveraging off each other's skills. We have OHU, we have collaboration groups where you can put your hand up and say, look, I don't know much about the technology, or I don't know enough about the business side or strategy side. Can you help me? And so it's not just the experts that we're getting to support the program, or the role that I play in facilitating some of those discussions, but it's also your cohort from that experience, their skill sets, their knowledge that you also pull on to help drive your final project outcome. And this is just a snapshot of what we're seeing. We've had 2 cohorts go through the program so far, and you can see this wide breadth of different industries, different ideas, different applications. And so, it's not just typical, it's not just agriculture or smart home or smart city. We're seeing everything from education. We're seeing a lot to do in utilities. We're seeing some really good projects come through in the fitness area. We're seeing obviously agriculture. But I think that the common theme here is people are really challenging of whether this is now, some of these solutions are good for the world, good for the planet, good for place, good for people, and making sure that we're just not putting solutions out there that are based on, technology provision, or because we have the technology capability that we're able to introduce this into industries. It's really that challenge at the start and then through the program on, are we doing the right thing? Are we designing these solutions in the most sustainable and ethical manner as well? And I think some of these examples here will determine, and we'll discuss, even though it might be a enterprise or industrial, what are those ethical considerations in those environments as well? Maheshi, back to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kirib. So I might just, we're moving on to the audience Q&A part of the presentation. So I'm just going to stop sharing screen. And yeah, really, Sho and Peter, if you had any questions for us.
Lots. Yeah, it's a hard one. There is a project in mind that I'm looking at. It's quite extensive and it's quite layered. And I'm happy to share it. It's in regards to the predator-free program that the government announced a few years back. And we're looking at a predator-free program to cover the Wanganui National Park, and it's 70,000 hectares. So the base of where we're at is the traps and the sensor systems we can put on the ground. The issue we have is then the amount of data that we are proposing to collect and then where it goes next. So and the reason I joined the program was in regards to looking at those different layers, which I've now found out in my old book. I used to call ISO with 7 layers, but now ISO is now OSI. The OSI layers were 7. Now the OSI layers are now 9. So that was an eye-opener. So there are now 9 layers to what I call the old OSI layers. And so from that perspective is, what are we going to do with that project? And whom and where and is the various layers needed to be at? So from my own perspective, or where and I'm talking about a tribal perspective, I'm sitting at the governance side of it. So I'm overall portfolio lead for this. But as far as once we start getting down or beyond my knowledge being of the physical infrastructure, and now we start getting into all the rest of it, which you will talk about, that's been a huge language understanding that I'm still working with. So trying to figure out where we go next, and it should encompass a large group. It should. And the larger we make the group, the lot easier we'll be able to make this work. So the financial side of it is there. The need is there. And we have the PSGEs and the Crown saying that we're going to do this type of program. From where this particular part is I'll talk about the lab. I'm failing to see beyond this point where the lab, I can see where it fits, but I'm unsure of how we need to implement this, because we're looking at a very short time frame. This needs to be put together. So we're talking about within the next, well, let's put it this way. They've already started the predator-free program as far as the rollout is already starting, deployment's already starting. So there was money put aside for this deployment to start, but that's fine. We've got sensors going on the ground. That's it. We don't know where to go next. So we're sending manpower into a national park starting with 4,000 hectares with, I think it's up to 4,000 sensor devices to try and kill as many of the predators in there as we can, or trap. Yeah, okay. It's doomed to failure, like before it starts. So what I proposed was, we need to understand the predators in there and understand where and how they are moving within the park in certain seasonal environments. And then we need to place our manpower in front of them and trap inside an area and remove an area. At the same time, because we're required to put a physical barrier around the outside perimeter, and that encases 7 PSGs or 7 iwi entities that surround that park, is that physically possible, the size of the area we're projecting to present? Cost-wise, it's physically impossible to do it. So capturing that data and moving it, and that whole analytics of that data needs to move to the next step. For the majority of the people I'm working with, that's beyond our capacity and beyond our capability. So from where I'm looking, I'm saying, well, whom do I need to introduce into these layers that has or is prepared to cover those, and what do we need to do to support them?
So Peter, I think, so you've just frozen there. Have I frozen?
At that level of what we would consider to be rangatahi or mukupunas doing it. So for me, the lab, I see that working really well within the lab environment. I'm just not sure how and when that goes or what that looks. So yeah, that's where I'm sitting at the moment.
Perfect. I think I'll address it from my perspective as an industry advisor to the Connection Environments Program and TFL at large. I think the design of the Connection Environments Program aligns really well to what you're trying to do from two perspectives. One is that a lot of the industry experts that we have coming in are talking about it from their context of how they've actually applied some of these techniques. And so they would have encountered some of these barriers, some of these hurdles, some of these problems before. And increasingly so, what we do in terms of the initial positioning of phase one of the Connection Environments Program is we don't consider the technology at all. We consider people, process, data at the first. So we have a look at that problem statement overview, and we have a look at the market and the situational analysis of that market and what the various actors are. So the journey management, the planning of customers, users, stakeholders, how that people, process, data interface happens before we start applying some of the technology elements to it, because there might be different technology solutions depending on some of those market needs. And so students during the first phase of the Connection Environments Program really are provided with some tools. And so, for example, we use PESTEL analysis. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but
No.
It's a framework. And so PESTEL is political, environmental, social, technological, legal, environmental. And it's a really good framework of going across those dimensions. What are all of the impact areas from a political, regulatory, policy area? What are we seeing? And we help identify and map that as part of that market analysis. From a social dynamic perspective, what is if we introduce it, what happens to the social dynamic of how people continue to interact, engage with that environment, and what happens? From an environmental perspective, and again, in predator-free, that's a large bearing. And so what are the potential impacts? What are the legal perspectives on introducing technologies like this as well? And so, we consider a lot of those elements prior to having a look at any of the technology deployments, because some of those will inform the technology choice in terms of how we introduce those technologies in. So that's a large part of that phase one of the program.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, it's that network, right? It's that you'd be exposed to, so I have startups in this space, and so I might be a really good partner for you, or maybe a good collaborator to help develop that. I also founded and run the New Zealand Iot Alliance, which is part of NZ Tech. And
yes, I've done due diligence on you guys.
A really wide area of network there. And so, my, as an advisor to TFL and having this, and there's lots of other advisors and experts that come and talk to the program. And so that's a network. The second part of it is then, often enough, with the introduction of a lot of these, we don't consider impact. And that's something that we designed as part of this program. Impact in that circular economy. Just because we can do it, should we do it, and how should we do it? Considering the impact on people, considering the impact on place, considering the impact, looking at Kaitiaki Tanga principles in terms of guardianship and what we want to leave in terms of the footprint, even in that environment. So, a lot of those sessions that we have come back to those principles as well of what we want to see, particularly in the natural environment, from the introduction of these technologies into that environment. And it's really important that, we continue to challenge, we continue to provoke our thoughts in terms of, we don't want to introduce and leave hard elements in the natural environment, even though they might be providing data and some really good outputs. Are we happy when those are decommissioned and we go, it's too expensive for us to go and collect those devices, now we're just going to leave them out there? That's not good enough if we're starting to push more and more of these devices out there. So we come back to the early design principles of these solutions to go, we need to make those considerations. We need to have that awareness of how we're building these, for when we introduce it, it leaves a lighter footprint as well. So those are just some of the key elements that we, that are across the program at the moment.
Yeah, well, I listened to you when, because I was in the last presentation you did to the team, and I found it very, very good from that perspective. So it's taken, I'll say, the last 10 years. It started with the national government in regards to how we were going to change our language, the way we speak to each other. And what I've seen since 2010, that first earthquake, to where we are now, what we said was always going to be the change year, 2020 and 2021. We knew where the change years. So we'd worked with Chris Finlayson, for example, and how we were going to take the way we speak and the way that the government speaks.
Yes.
And so the new language that we find has been spoken now is a good positive language, but it's beyond the capacity of beyond the capacity of some of the knowledge of our own language, of our own older ones, our own understanding. So where we see this needing to go, it needs to go there. So but we've also come to the understanding that I'll call it the older ones shouldn't be making this lead. So the younger ones should be making this lead. And we understand. Now that I've been a part of the program, I do get where you're going from and the way we need to languagize this. Linguistics, language is where we need to go next. Yep. We've planned a lot of projects working with the government. And there's a lot of projects that you're now seeing on a national level, now coming to the table. This is well planned. The downside, the challenge is that the understanding or the intelligence necessary to implement those programs, there's a big gap there. And so it's taking these large projects, these large programs, understanding that at each of the lower levels, for example, we've got 6 iwi entities that need to understand this, and they're talking at a slightly different language level and having to engage with those particular industries at that level with no real understanding of how to do it themselves. So it's a bit of a step forward, understand where it is, and then go the next step and go the next step, and then get a whole lot of people to follow. So it's, a lot of things you talk about. Do we leave the sensor units? Well, we've already we understand the deployment requirements and how we're going to get them in and out. But so the equipment-wise, we've been planning this equipment, and we know the right equipment we need to put on the ground and how it's going to work. And we've got the manpower who need to go in there. The downside is, once the manpower gets in there, we lose communication with them all for long periods of time. And that's the other thing. The only way they can get in there is on a helicopter, on a horse, or if they're really lucky, they might get a boat ride down the river. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's walk everywhere. Yep. Or do we position a whole heap of them, or manpower, in a given area on a campsite? Mm-hmm. But then how do we communicate with them when you can't communicate with anybody inside the park? And it's all these things have now come to the fore where we go next. And are we actually doing what we said we were going to do in regards to predator free? Mm-hmm. There is no records of anything we can do. Mm-hmm. So over the period of the last 5 years, 6 years, as we've attempted to engage with external entities, corporates who have some understanding of this, their language they're speaking to us doesn't make sense. No. So hence, I was required to come and learn what the hell all these people are talking about. Yep. And then try and figure out who inside our network, or inside our own groupings, at that lower level, can speak the same language as these people. Mm-hmm. So
I think one of the things that Connected Environments, and I run a strategic advisory company, and one of the reframings of IoT is we don't want to think of the things. We don't want to think of the devices and the technology. We're reframing that conversation to be more of the interface of things rather than the internet. We want to understand the connection points between people, process, technology, data. What's the engagement? What's the interaction? What's the interface between each of these layers? And so it's the interface of all of these collection mechanisms, the processing algorithms, the presentation ways. How do we interface? How do we communicate? How do we engage? That's more important to establishing an IoT environment or a sensing environment than the establishment of just the collection mechanism, which is quite easy to do. So how do we get that interface and that language? So interface, engagement, interaction is the new language now in terms of understanding what the value of that insight is to that end customer, and how can we capitalize on that?
But the understanding, the challenge we have is that our language only has 15 letters. Right. So out of everything you said, only one of the words fits inside our language that is presently being presented to everybody. So in a Māori dictionary, only one was there. And all these other words are slowly being introduced. by all these external organizations. That's fine. Now we've got to figure out how to take it and put it into a written document that someone can sit there and read it and get the, as we call it, the kaupapa, the whakapapa that goes behind it, the focus on where it's going next. What's the pathway? Where's the hikoi? And then embracement from that perspective. So my role here is to take these words and then put them into a visual perspective and put it into a phrase or saying that I can go back and say, and they read it, they go, that makes sense.
Understand. Yes.
So a connected environment, we can't put that into our language. Not in those two words, it's impossible. So I have to now go away and think, there, I was thinking about as you're talking, connected environment. I now have to go back, sit down and do some study inside our language and say, how would I put that as a phrase that when someone says a connected environment, it actually means this.
Yep.
And the challenge I've always found is the use of a lot of nouns.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And having to reconvert them back to a phrase that's full of adjectives and verbs.
Yes.
Or and that's been the biggest struggle I've had. Even though our younger generation, they are also taught those words. Well, that younger generation needs to be taught how to put it back into its language that it should be in, and that language being, in its first instance, te reo Māori.
Hey, Peter. I'm really sorry. I'm just really conscious of time at the moment.
Sorry,
but that's okay. If Kriv, you had any other comments to add to Peter's thoughts, if you want.
Another time. We'll talk all day about this. We can really
find me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation. I think.
Sorry.
And this will be a really good candidate project for the program.
For everybody, I'd love everybody to be a part of it. And that's what I'm looking for. Those who are prepared to take bits and pieces and do your thing for it. So,
no worries.
I'll go back to
mute. Still a great discussion, though. Sure. Did you have any questions that you wanted to ask as well?
For me, it was more practical situation because of changes happening. So that's why I'll give a call on that and sometime this week. So it's okay, no question for me.
No worries. I mean, while we have Kriv on the call as well as the industry advisor for the connected environments, it could be a good time to ask any quick questions if you had any.
Because this is kind of one semester course, isn't it? Yeah, and the two group semester.
Yeah, so, 32 weeks.
Yeah. It's mine's more with the feasibility. It's not that I don't want to do the masters. It's just
okay, cool.
Yeah. So that's all the same. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll chat later then and how that can work for you. Cool. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks for the great discussions, Peter. Sure. I'm just gonna go on to what the next steps look like. So please bear with me while I just share my screen. There we go. So if you are interested in learning a little bit more about how to enroll in the Connected Environments program, we've got some links here that'll take you to the program handbook and go details all the dates and those assessments that Kriv mentioned earlier, and a link there to enroll now. So when you enroll 4 weeks prior to those two intakes, so that's March and July, you'll get a 10% off early bird. So a little bit of an incentive to lock in your study dedication. There's also a link there. Schedule a chat with me if needed. Otherwise, you'll have my details, and Peter, you can also reach out to me directly and link up with Kriv as well. So we'll share his LinkedIn details too. And we can also find a student or a graduate of the Connected Environments program if there's someone who might be working in a relevant space that you might benefit from having a conversation with. So the financing options, as well as mentioned before by Maheshi, is you can discuss this with your employer who could be able to help you financially. And some students will have a partial contribution from their employer, and that remaining amount can also go onto StudyLink, or you can pay for that for yourselves. Otherwise, you can pop the entire course onto a StudyLink student loan as well, and pay that off over time through your full-time work or part-time work, and the fees-free scheme if you haven't studied before. Scholarships are also available, as mentioned, for Māori Pacific or those aged over 60. So there's my details there as well. We'll share this pack with you, and you can reach out to me, mobile, email, or book a chat. Otherwise, I will close off and close off the space for the great discussions that we had today, and we can be on our ways into our lovely Tuesday night. So, ka whikiiria te tapu, kia wātia ai te ara, kia turuki whakatahai, kia turuki whakatahai, haumie, huie, tai kie.
Tai kie.